Hey everyone, welcome back to the Improviser's Corner. It's hard to believe that this is our 10th and final episode for the season 1, so I thought it'd be fitting to take a look back at some of the highlights from our inspiring guests this past year and also look forward to some exciting new changes coming our way in 2020. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy a year in review on the Improviser's Corner. Nashville, Tennessee is home to some of the world's finest musicians, from country music to R&B to hip-hop and everything in between. If you've heard it, Nashville's got it. But ever since I moved to the city in 2013, I've met some incredible musicians who fall in between the cracks. Amazing musicians who are passionate about that other music. So I'm not here to talk about the music you've probably heard. I'm here to introduce you to them, illuminate their music, and share their stories. My name is David Rodgers. I'm an improviser, composer, and pianist here in Music City, USA, and I want to welcome you to the Improviser's Corner. One of my favorite parts of being the host on the Improviser's Corner is seeing firsthand how improvisation truly transcends musical genre. When we talk about music as a language, improvisations are the conversations. In the same way that you don't really plan out conversations with your friends, the improvisations on the Improviser's Corner are truly improvised in the moment. Each guest brings their musical background with them, and so there's kind of this fun excitement and challenge that comes with each episode, trying to create spontaneously. My friend Michael B. Hicks, who I'm excited to feature early next year on the Improviser's Corner, told me that there's this lineage in between this music. Like in jazz, we say improvisation. In rap or hip-hop, we say freestyling. In soul and R&B, we might say vibing, and in gospel music, we just say following the spirit. And we certainly followed the spirit in episode 8 with Mabel Pleasure, amazing Hammond organist. And it was really cool and inspiring to hear her story, and that all her years of staying the course, playing, practicing, in and out of clubs, in and out of church, really paid off when she was recognized and signed as official Hammond recording artist. I was also fortunate enough to have two of my favorite musicians in Nashville on the show. Keyboardist Paul Horton in episode 3 and bassist Greg Bryant in episode 5. Together they formed the band Concurrence, which if you haven't checked them out, definitely do that. But in episode 5, you'll notice that Greg brought to our attention this idea of other music, or improvisation away from jazz, and I think that's a really important distinction to make, because jazz is not just improvisation, and likewise, improvisation is certainly not jazz. To that point, actually, one of my favorite episodes was episode 4 with singer-songwriter Jess Nolan, when she had improvised a free write earlier that morning, and when she came by for the show, together we improvised music together, which ended up being that song for that free write she had written. And for all the singer-songwriters out there, I know that this is pretty common, like this is just a co-write, but for me personally, I think this was the first time I'd actually experienced improvisation in that setting, or my first co-write. I think improvisation can feel like this huge, looming, ambiguous thing that it's hard to break down sometimes. On episode 2 with Jimmy Sullivan, we kind of broke down his process for improving in all areas, including improvisation. And we touched on this some more in the most recent episode with Chris Walters, where we talked about how great musicians are not great just by coincidence. They've really taken the time to sit down and analyze their flaws and really work tirelessly at improving. So I'm looking forward now to 2020. Next year, in just 3 weeks, it'll be January 1st, which is pretty crazy. And I want to take a look at some exciting changes coming to the Improviser's Corner. I think one of the big things that's going to be different is that in addition to these video podcasts that we'll do where I highlight members of this Nashville community, I'm also excited to add audio-only podcasts where either I or a guest and I will sit down and go real in depth with certain topics that might be raised during the video podcasts. One of the big things that I actually talked about with Alicia Enstrom on episode 7 was how classical musicians at some point stopped improvising. So it's pretty rare to find a classical musician these days who is very comfortable improvising. And so I'm wondering, how did that happen? When did that first happen? Because traditionally, all these great classical composers who we now consider to be the greats, they were all improvisers. I'm also excited to have some really great educators on the podcast next year, because ultimately I'm curious about how do we teach this thing called improvisation? It's so ambiguous, but how do we break it down and really communicate it to students at various levels? When my good buddy Daniel Sauls came by the show on episode 6, I think it was, one of the things he said that really stuck with me was how when he is creating, he's really trying to create a vibe or create a space more than anything else. And I think that really struck me because it's really easy to get lost in the minutia of information, especially when we're coming out of an academic setting. But I think it's important to remember why it is that we're doing all this. Ultimately, this should be feeding back into the community. And on the very first episode with my good buddy David Williford, awesome saxophonist and composer here in Nashville, that's one of the things we really touched on was how strong of a community Nashville has and what a big role this community has played in each of our lives. And so as we look forward to 2020 and expanding the Improviser's Corner, I think I'm just most excited first and foremost to just continue doing this thing that I find exciting, to continue highlighting these various members of the Nashville music community who are underrated and who deserve the spotlight. I'm also excited to add the audio-only component and just dig a little deeper and unpack some of these big questions surrounding improvisation and music in general. But I think more than anything else, I'm just grateful to, first of all, everyone who has been on the show, all the guests who sort of took that leap of faith with me in this first season, who are willing to sit down and sort of be guinea pigs of sorts. I'm also grateful for all of you for checking it out and for watching, for giving me feedback, and for supporting this inaugural season of the Improviser's Corner. You know, this project really began for me as a passion project towards the end of last year, and I'm hopeful that eventually this can turn into something where not only do we learn from each other in new ways, but we're also inspired to improvise in new ways as well. So thanks again, and I'll see you next year.